Hello, everybody, and welcome back to DJ Tutorials. This is a brand new tutorial series on how to create a better coffee cup. Keep in mind, this is going to require a little bit of research on your side to kind of find out which coffee cup you really want to create. If you want to create exactly what I'm making, you can feel free to do so, and I'll show you how to do that. But basically, this tutorial series is going to show you how to do a great many things that will help you in modeling, texturing, and just developing your own modeling projects and renderings. So basically, what you're going to end up with is something similar to this right here. It won't look exactly like this since this was more of a testing scene that I did for a couple things. But more or less, you're going to have something like this coffee cup here, and you'll be able to duplicate it and do other things like that. And what we're going to be doing is not only modeling it, but we're going to be creating all of these textures and patterns and baking out those textures so that you can move it to different render engines or even a video game engine if you want. And also, we're going to be shading and creating the liquid inside and just creating a general scene for you. Now, just a disclaimer, I am not going to be showing in this series, at least not at first. I might do it later. I'm not going to be showing you how to create the sugar cubes here and the spoon or the coffee pot here or the sugar holder or any of this other stuff. Really, it's just on this cup here. And that should give you enough information on how to then create this saucer here. And based on your guys' feedback, I might do the saucer in a separate video or something like that, or even the spoon. But just so that you know, we're really just going to be tackling this coffee cup right here, and it will end up being rendered in cycles. But you can pretty much use whatever engine that you want at the end of this. So to begin with, what you really need to do is you need to find out what you're going to use as far as reference material for your coffee cup. And for me, I really like 1920s and 30s style and design. So I just typed in 1920s coffee cup and just a disclaimer, if you want to do something simple like this, you could do that. There's a lot of tutorials how to do this sort of very, very simple sort of thing. But really, what this tutorial is for is more advanced and detailed work in creating a really nice portfolio piece. So you can feel free to kind of grab whichever one you want. Just keep in mind that if they have patterns or specific things like that, you will end up needing to create that or download that from somewhere else. So the one that I really liked was this one right here because it was a different sort of design you don't really see often in tutorial videos. So it has sort of like a more geometric look here with these pointed edges and a more sort of organic shape here for the handle. And the pattern that's used here and the pattern that's used here kind of to me was a really good example of how we can create some of these, or at least a tutorial series on how we can create some of these more detailed and custom patterns and designs inside of Blender and using a couple other programs as well. So basically what you can do is do a search, find something you like, make sure that you open the, not the link, but the image. Open the image in a new tab, and you can right click and save these to create some reference material for the thing that you're going to create. And I want to briefly go into how to kind of set up your file before we begin, your file structure before we begin, so that you can keep everything organized right from the beginning. So right here, I have already created a file, and let me see, this is kind of as big as it's going to get. Let's do extra large icons. So I basically created a PRJ folder, which is short for project, a textures folder, because we will be filling this with rendered out or baked out textures, as well as textures that we create ourselves, and a folder that you can call inspiration or reference or whatever it is that you want to call it. And I've kind of placed a bunch of different images in here that I found online. And if I kind of make this a little bit bigger, you can kind of see what they are. So I found this 1920s German style uh, coffee pot. I found this coffee cup here that I ended up using. And then I also found this one here that I really liked because it um, it kind of had more of I liked how many sides it had. So these 10 sides versus uh, the 8 I think there is here. And you can see here where I kind of got some inspiration for creating a couple of the things. Here's the spoon here and everything else. So I really recommend doing this and keeping all of this reference material in a folder and separated so that you can really sort of look at these and see what you really like, and you can do a amalgamation between different ideas or create exactly what's there. But what we're going to be creating is something between this one here and this one here. So what we're going to do is we're going to go ahead and jump into Blender here, and you can open up a default scene with the cube. And before we begin, we need to turn on some add-ons inside of Blender. So if you go up to Edit, Preferences, and what you're going to want to find is the Add Mesh Extra Objects, and then you want to find what is called Mesh Loop Tools. So those are the two add-ons we're going to use for right now to create our coffee cup. Once you're done selecting those, go ahead and save your preferences here or go to the autosave. And I'm going to go ahead and make sure the screencast keys are on here. And for those of you who are new, over here on the left, you can see my mouse and button commands. And then on the bottom, you can also see the keyboard and the mouse, just in case you really need to see what's going on or if the screencast keys end up not working, which happens sometimes. So let's go ahead and begin here, and we're going to start by deleting this cube. And I'm going to show you two ways that you can basically create the cup, but we're really going to go with one way. And the first that I'm going to show you right here is how pretty much every other tutorial starts for the basic cups. So if you hit Shift A to add and you go down to circle, you can select at the bottom left here, and I'm sorry, the screencast keys are in the way, but you can see that there's vertice counts and other stuff down here. And this will basically allow you to create a circle with whatever sort of verts you want and change the size and all of that. But we're not going to use this method. Uh, but anyway, I'll show you kind of how they do it. So you'll go into edit mode here by hitting tab. You will extrude, and you will sort of shape it according to your reference material like this, and they will have you create the inside usually. Sometimes they have you use a solidify modifier to do the inside. And basically you'll end up with something sort of like this. Let's go. And you don't need to follow me here. I'm just kind of showing you what they do, and we're going to do something different. Um, so this is kind of what you would end up doing, and then you'd create a handle and everything else from here. Now, that's great for a lot of beginners, and that's wonderful. But I really want to show you a much better way, in my opinion, to do this, and a way that will allow you to create more complex objects and have a little bit more control as you're creating it. So I'm going to go ahead and delete this. And what we're going to actually do is we're going to start with a single vertex. I'm going to go ahead and save my file here. So file, save as, navigate to where your PRJ folder is, and we're going to say, I'm going to save mine as coffee cup step 1. And just by the way, I already have a sort of like finished one here just for my own reference, but yours should look pretty much like this, where you just have the camera here, and you could even delete that camera if you wanted, because we really don't need that. So let's make sure that our 3D cursor is centered by hitting Shift C. And what you're going to do is you're going to hit Shift A to add, and then in Mesh, you should find this single vert right here. And then you're going to click Add Single Vert. If you don't see this, you're going to need to add that add-on that I talked about that says the extra mesh object. So just make sure you have that on. And it's going to create this little tiny point right here. Okay. And then we need to add one more thing before we really begin, and that's to add our reference. So make sure that you're not in edit mode here. So go up to the top left, go to object mode to make sure you're not in edit mode, and then hit Shift A and add image reference. Then you're going to navigate to the folder that you've saved your references in. So I'm going to go into here, into references. You can change the look over here by going to thumbnails. And we're going to add this one right here. So there's our reference in the background. We're going to go over here to the right, go to Object Data Properties, we're going to move it on the y-axis up a little bit so that it's more, the bottom is more in line with our 3D cursor and the vertex point we created. Maybe a little bit more here. Then you're going to go over here to transparency so we can see our grid in the background, and you're going to change the opacity to something that's good for you so that you can see the reference material, but it's also not covering up your grid lines. Make sure that you save often, so I'm going to go ahead and save the file. And up here on the top right, you can name these. So where it says empty here, we can change this to cup reference. And where it says vert, we can double click that and change that to cup. Make sure that you have the cup selected, and then we're going to go into edit mode. So you can click the drop down here, or you can simply hit tab. And it's a little bit difficult to know when you're in edit mode. I got a little confused earlier because I forgot that I was in edit mode with this little vert since it's just one point. So if you're ever confused, just look up here on the top left and see if you're in edit or object mode. And now what we're going to do is we're going to basically extrude this point and create, I hope you guys can see that little line there. We're going to extrude a basically an edge outline. And then we're going to do a rotation extrusion that's going to allow us to control the amount of sides and just have a little bit more control in how we create the edges of our object. Now just hit right click, which is going to double up the vertex points here. And if I hit G to grab, you can see that it was still there. Oops, I'm gonna hit Control Z here. You can see that it was still doubled up there. So once you hit it, extrude, or E to extrude it, and if you right click to reset it, you still have a vertex point there. So just be aware of that as you're building this out, okay? A lot of times beginners will extrude something, right click and forget that they extruded it, then they will hit E again and now they have doubled up points. I'll show you how you can get rid of that later before you do your rotation extrusion. Just keep that in mind because that may be an issue for you. So I'm going to hit Control Z to make sure we just start with the single vertex point here to begin with. Oops. And I'll just delete that so we can start just with this. And I would recommend that you watch this part first, then rewind, go back, and do it with me so that you really understand what's going to happen as you're building out the edges of this object. All right. So what we're going to do here is we're going to go ahead and grab that vertex point, and you're going to hit E to extrude it, and you can hold Control to sort of put it on the wider grid lines, or hold Shift and you can have it be precisely on the smaller grid lines in your scene. Or if you just want to do it freehand, you can not do any of that and just kind of place it, but you could run into issues there. So what I'm going to do here is I'm going to set it up so it's roughly in line with this bottom edge here. So we have this line here, and you can left click and drag as long as you have the select box up here selected for your tool. I'm going to hit E to extrude, and I'm just going to start creating this edge here. And we want to do this in broad strokes. You don't want to add little tiny points all along this thing. You kind of just want to start adding these points as you go and moving them and changing the location of where they're located just so that you can get a rough outline of this overall object. And yours is going to be a little bit different. You may want to do mine first, the same idea that I'm creating here, and then do your own. That's totally up to you. Now, what I'm going to do here is you have to kind of use your imagination. On the bottom of cups, there are usually a little divot in the bottom that goes up inside of it, and you have to kind of imagine that the 3D object is going to have this extrusion. And in the bottom, there's usually that divot that I talked about, or this like sort of like change in the geometry that goes up like this. So what we're going to do here is on the bottom, I'm going to select this bottom edge here with the edge selection. I'm going to right click, subdivide, and then down here you can choose how many times to subdivide this. And I'm going to select 2. And if I go back to the vertex select, you can see that I have 1, 2. So it's subdivided it twice. Then I'm going to left click and drag these two verts, and I'm going to right click and subdivide that 1 time. Then I'm going to grab all of this here, and I'm going to hit G and then Z to lock it, and then move that up a little bit. and I'm going to hold Control and Shift. So when this extrudes and we see it in 3 dimensions, you will see that this part will be up inside the cup, and then this will be the outer edge on the bottom. So now, what I would recommend doing is hit A for all, and you're going to grab all of the vertexes, and then hit M. And what you're going to do here is you're going to merge by distance. And what that's going to do is over here in the bottom, you'll see if you had any doubled up vertice points or vertex points. And that will help save you from a lot of trouble as we start to build this out. Because once you start to do a lot more of the building of this object in 3 dimensions, if you have doubled up points and you don't know they're there, it does create a problem for you. So next thing I'm going to do here is I'm just going to show you, and you can do this if you want, you don't have to do this. I'm going to save. And I'm just going to split this window, and I'm going to open up, I'm going to go to the image editor here on both of these, and I'm going to open in my references folder this one that we're pretty much creating. But also, I really liked the amount of edges on this one. I like that this was 10 points here that will allow us to, I don't know, I just like how that looked. So you could do it like this if you want. I'm going to do this many points or sides on this one. So this one has 10, this one had 8. And that matters because what we're going to do here is we're going to take this edge and we're going to go over here to this tool here called Spin. So if we take this edge here, or the spin, and we left click and drag this plus sign, and hold Control, we can actually see that there's now a 3-dimensional form that's being created. And if you're holding Control at the bottom left, you can see where it says Spin. And the spin, you can make it go all the way to 360 degrees. Now, if you accidentally left click and or release the left click and you make a mistake, that's fine, because what we can do here is we can actually take the angle and move it here, or we can type in -360, hit enter, and it's created 360-degree extrusion rotation of our 3D object. Then you can change the steps here to be anything you want. If it's perfectly round and you're not going to be creating these edges like we're doing here with these sides, you can change the amount of steps here to whatever you'd like, but I wouldn't recommend it. I'd kind of recommend doing this first so you can see what we're doing. And I'm going to go down to 10 since that's the amount of sides that we want, because I kind of want this these 10 sides here instead of the 8 that's here. And you can see that that's basically what's happened here. We've created 10 sides. So 1, 2, 3, 4, 5, 6, 7, 8, 9, 10. And that's going to be kind of the base of our cup here. So make sure that use duplicates isn't selected and make sure this auto merge is selected here. And we're basically done with this part of it. And you can hit tab to go into object mode and kind of take a look at what you've sort of created at this point. Now what I would do is I would go into edit mode and I would do what's called edge loop selection. So if we go up here to edges and you hold Alt and you left click these edges here, you can scale with S to sort of fine tune the shaping. And remember, we're just doing general shaping. Do not go and add like a whole bunch of loops or anything. And if you know how to add loops, that's great, which I'll show you right now actually. So Control R will actually add a loop to it. So like this, and you can sort of slide it around and right click to set it or keep it in the center. But at this point, really, it should just be some basic shaping, and you can Alt left click and scale this up or down. Take the bottom down here and scale that up or down depending on where it should be according to the size that you're trying to create. And then for the bottom here, you can kind of take a look at that and see if there's something you want to adjust down here. Now at this point, what we're going to do is we're going to actually add a subdivision surface modifier to see what's going on with our cup. So I'm going to hit Control S to save. And we're going to go over here and we're actually going to use the hotkey. So if you hit Control 2, you can see on the right for the modifier, we've added a subdivision surface modifier. And we're going to right click the object select Shade Smooth, and this is kind of the shape that we have right now. It's not perfect because there's all kinds of other stuff we're going to end up doing here to make these edges and shapes more crisp, but this is kind of where we're starting from. So again, you don't necessarily have to use this method to create the shape. It's just my preferred method and the method we're going to be using for this particular object. Now, what we're going to do here is we're going to start to create these more sharp edges here, and we're going to create this sort of like gold section or the metallic section here. And we're going to do that by using what's called a bevel. So what you want to do is go up here to the edge select, and you will hit Alt or hold Alt, left click, and select, and then hold Shift and Alt left click all of the edges along here. Just like that. Okay. Then what we want to do is we want to use the bevel. I'm going to go up here to the select box here just to make sure we don't accidentally spin this. I'm going to hit Control B, which is going to, and I'm going to hold Shift here, and that's going to bevel these edges or create basically what is referred to as a bevel. And if you roll up on your middle mouse wheel, you can add more or less bevels. We really don't want to do that right now. I'm just showing you that you can. We want to just make it like this. And if you sort of slide your mouse around, you can control how much of a bevel you're creating. And what you want to do is make sure that you're looking. I'm going to right click here to cancel the bevel. What you want to do is you want to kind of look at this and create sort of that amount of bevel or that amount of the metal that's going to be created there. So if we zoom in a little bit, hit Control B to bevel, and then move it out and hold Shift, we can control with a lot of precision how much of that is going to be there. And we will left click here to set it. The next thing that we're going to do is we're going to sort of refine the bottom of our cup here. And if we look at the reference material on the right, you can see that it sort of comes down to a point, and it's a pretty sharp angle change here from the bottom to the underneath that would be there. I don't have a reference for the bottom, but we kind of have to create that. And what you can see here is that there is a sort of, with the subdivision here, there is a sort of shaping there, but it's a little bit too smooth. And there are two ways that we can handle that. If you hold Alt and you left click down here and you open up where it says Item, let me turn on the screencast keys here because I appear to have lost that. If I go up to Item and you go to Mean Crease, you can actually crease the bottom to sort of control that angle. Now, I've already done this, so I kind of know that this isn't the method we want to use. And what we're going to do is we're going to hit 1 to go to the front view, hit Control R to add a loop, left click, and then drag down a bit to be roughly about there. And this is going to be our sort of bottom edge that's going to have this metallic shape here. And this should be roughly the same size as these edges here. And if you placed it, let's say on accident somewhere like up here, what you can do is you can hit G twice and you can sort of shift that along the three-dimensional object to get it where you want it to be. So I'm just going to move that right down towards the bottom, right about there. And then you can left click to set that. The next thing is down here. If you don't like this shaping, you can add some loop cuts here. So if I hit Control R and slide that in, I can make that edge a little bit more sharp. And if I want to sort of like make this more crisp down here, I can do the same thing, just adding that with Control R and shifting it around. Now, what you're seeing at the very bottom here is a problem, and we're going to fix this right now. So if I am moving around my object, or you may have already seen this and are wondering if I'm going to talk about it, I'm going to save here. You may be wondering what the heck is going on. Well, basically, all of the points here, when we rotated our object around, all of the points have met in the center. Now what I can do here is I can try to select all of these points by having the select box tool here selected, left clicking and dragging, and then hitting M and then merging by distance. And you can create a point like that. The only problem is that if I'm going to be shading this in a certain way, and if I go up here and turn on matte cap, and then I turn on this metallic here, you're not really seeing it here, but what tends to happen is that the bottom here can look a little bit strange. It can sometimes look like this point is very visible when, like, kind of like that. You see that right there where you can see sort of like these weird sort of ripples? So I'm going to Control Z to get rid of that. And what we're going to do is we're actually going to do a method that I have shown on a previous tutorial series on basic geometric objects. And we're going to delete this point. Let's see, I just want the point here. So I'm going to go to point select or vertex select and just grab that and delete that. And what you can do to sort of like mitigate that issue is you can hold Alt and left click this loop cut here, hit F3, and then type in grid and go down to where it says grid fill and hit enter. And that's going to create this sort of shape here, or this mesh for the bottom. Now it's not the best thing ever because you can see there's not really a loop right here, but you can select this and move it up and down, and you'll see that it kind of deletes, or not deletes, but it kind of mitigates that issue that we were seeing before. And you can grab this and you can move it in a little bit, and you can take this loop cut, hit G twice to sort of slide that around to tighten up your mesh a little bit, and you can add a loop cut here to tighten up the mesh there. Now, if you went ahead and did that and you kind of don't like what's going on, and let me just turn off this reference here because it's kind of in the way. And what I'm also going to do is I'm going to turn this on right here that says on cage. It's going to show us what our actual subdivision surface modifier is doing here. You can see that there's sort of like the angle changes are happening from here, are happening on the bottom. And often on cups particularly, you don't really see this. It comes to kind of more of a smooth circular edge. So what we're going to do here is we're actually going to recreate that smooth circular edge here by, number one, deleting everything that we've done down here. So I apologize, but if you want to do this, this is how we're going to handle it. And I do recommend you doing this because it does teach you a few things about how to uh, create certain types of meshes. So we're going to select this loop cut here, and you can hit Control plus to select more of it, or you can hit, you can just kind of uh, Alt left click to select these, and then also hold Shift to box select this, however you want to do it. And we're going to actually delete all the way up until here, okay? And I'm going to hit X, and then we're going to delete the vertices. Now from here, I'm going to Alt and left click this loop cut here, and I'm going to hit Control 7, which is going to show us the very bottom of our object, sort of like centered. Then, if you go up here to Edit, you will find underneath this dropdown what's called Loop Tools. And this is where a lot of the tutorials kind of don't show you how to do this, and I really wanted to show you guys how you can basically transform this sort of shape here to a circular edge. So if you hit circle or hit this drop down here, you can see there's all these sort of things. Just leave it as it is here. Select circle. And you'll see that it's basically made a circular sort of version, or it has rounded this out to make a circle. And if this is kind of what we're doing here, this can kind of work. And you can rotate this. If you hit R, you can sort of rotate this. And if you hold Control and Shift, you can sort of, have it more locked on a grid line, so to speak. And you can rotate this around and get it kind of like this here. So it's more in line if we look really close here. And I'm going to hit Control Z so you can kind of see this a little bit closer. You see how it kind of like curves this up a little bit and it's kind of like off center a little bit? If you hit R and then you hold Shift and Control, you can kind of rotate this around and get it a little bit more even. It doesn't have to be 100% perfect. If you want to try to get 100% perfect, you can go ahead and try and do that. But this should suffice just fine. And then from here, what we can do is we can hit E to extrude, hit Z to lock it on the Z axis, and hold Shift and sort of recreate the bottom of our cup here by hitting E, hitting S to scale in, and then just sort of hitting E, S to scale, and then grabbing it on Z and just sort of like reshaping the bottom of this how we see fit. So you can see here, I'm just sort of left clicking and loop cut selecting all of this here, and I'm just scaling it. You can hit G twice if it's a loop cut on the inside like this to move it around to sharpen up these edges here. And for the center here, we're going to do the same thing as we did before when we're ready. I'm going to do one more extrusion, scale it in a little bit, grab it on Z, pull it down, and then I'm going to hit F3 and select grid fill here. And that kind of will give us roughly what I would like to see with this particular cup. And again, you can just sort of refine this however you'd like to see it. If you don't like how this looks with the grid fill here, you can select that, delete the vertices, loop cut select this, and hit F. Try that if you'd like, but you can see that it makes this sort of ripply look. Control Z, I will Control Z to undo that. You can hit E to extrude, scale, just so that it's separated out from this one here, and then hit M, and then select, which will merge it, and then merge at center, which will create this, which I'm not a big fan of. So it really depends on what you kind of want it to look like. I tend to like this sort of grid fill look here because it sort of softens everything like that out. Okay, so that will help you with the bottom here to create a nice and rounded circular look instead of that sort of edged look on the bottom. So the next thing we're going to do here is we're going to do the same thing with the top. We're going to hold Alt left click to select this up here. We're going to hit E to extrude, then right click to set it where it was and hit S to scale in. And we're just going to start creating the overall top shape here that we see. Now, obviously, this is a low resolution image, so we kind of have to use our imagination a little bit, but you can see that we kind of have a transition from this metal look here to the ceramic right on the top edge, and then it goes down into the cup. And we can add loop cuts as we do it, as we continue with this creation here. So you want to just get in your broad strokes first. So just to show you what we already did here, select the top edge, hit E to extrude, scale in, hit E to extrude, and scale in a little bit more if you want, or hit G and Z to move it down on the Z axes. Okay. And basically what we want to do is we want to create this top edge where your lips sort of like wrap around. Now, when you're at the point where you're ready to start going actually down into the cup, what we need to do is the same thing as we did before. I'm going to hit 7 here to go to the top view. And it's a little hard to see, but basically we have this edge selected here. You can feel free to scale in and hit 7 so you can see it a little bit easier, because then you can scale it out later to move it. Click circle. And it's the same thing here as we did for the bottom. You can rotate it to get a little bit more even and scale it out. And we're going to scale it out a little bit more, grab it on Z. And this is all fine tuning stuff. So the main things here is E for extrusion, S for scaling, and making sure that you're locking stuff on an axis like SZ for going, sorry, not scaling, grab. So G for grab, and then Z to move it up and down. You don't want to accidentally hit G and move it all over the place because your object won't be symmetrical. So let's go ahead, and once you've made that a circle shape, you can keep extruding, scaling it in, and you can go to the front view here. At this point, go to wireframe by holding Z and going to the wireframe or selecting it up here at the top right. And you can sort of start to shape it according to the reference that you have in the back. Let me just turn that back on. You can use it that way, or you can just look at your object and scale and shift and change the overall shape of your cup. So I'm going to go to wireframe here, E to extrude, and again, we're just doing the large strokes here. E to extrude, Z to lock it down, scale it in. Then at the bottom, EZ, S to scale, grab it on Z, maybe something more like this. And since the inside is kind of not going to be seen, it's going to be filled with a fluid, I'm just going to hit F to create a face. You can create the grid like I did down there or whatever it is you'd like to do, but really no one's going to be seeing the inside of that most likely. But if you are going to make it to where someone sees the inside, you might want to handle it in this manner here. Now let's fine tune this a little bit more like we did with the bottom. At the top here, you can take this edge here and you can move it in, and maybe take this top one here and move it in a little bit more. And what we'll probably want to do here is hit Control R, add a loop, and sort of tighten this up by moving it up a little bit like that. Okay, so I'm going to spend a little bit longer refining this, and you can kind of follow along with me, and I might speed this up just so that it's a little bit faster. But basically all I'm going to do is I'm just going to scale and maybe add a loop cut or two if I feel it needs it. So that's going to be it for this part. Take your time, watch the video a couple times, maybe create a couple different versions of your cup to really make sure that you know what's going on and the techniques that are done here. And hopefully I'll see you on the next part. The next part will be on how to basically add a couple basic materials to take a look at the mesh, and also to add the handle and refine the overall look of the cup to make sure we're getting something really nice. Again, I'm planning on getting these out about one a week, so that should give you enough time to really make sure you know what's going on in this video before moving on to the next part. Thanks for watching, and if you like this video, please hit the like button and subscribe, and make sure that you hit the little bell icon to notify you when new videos are uploaded. And I will see you next time on DJ Tutorials.